Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I can't apologize for the rain, but I will apologize for the delay in the tent. Safety of our employees is paramount, and we wanted to make sure that the employees were not out putting up the tents in a lightning and thunderstorm. So I appreciate your patience, and we're a little bit soggy, but I think it's appropriate given the type of event that we're here for. So good morning. My name is Janae Prevost-White. I'm the Operations Manager for the Water Resources Division in the City of Richmond, Department of Public Utilities. And we're here today to unveil what will be the first of 3 signs marking a significant storm event that took place over a few days in late June 1972, which was Hurricane Agnes. Just 18 days into the new hurricane season, last Thursday, Richmond metro area, including Richmond, Chesterfield, Charlottesville, Goochland, and Hanover counties experienced a fast-moving storm, leaving a wake of damage in what one Dominion, Virginia Power employee said was just like a hurricane. What many thought would be a quick-moving summer storm turned out to leave the state of Virginia with well over 250,000 businesses and homes without power. While the storm didn't do much in the way of flooding, had the rain intensified, the situation could have been much different. I had this fun story to tell you about how people were out and we're all better now and the weather was cool, and then we got hit with this. So I don't want to make jokes about it at this point. I think we should just move on. So again, the weather is quick to remind us that there's no safety in our complacency. No one thinks about flooding until it happens. When they do, it's too late. As I was doing research for this project, the more people I spoke to, I realized that everyone has a hurricane story. I'm not sure if you realize, I didn't realize, but anyone who's lived on the East Coast in the past 15 years has some type of hurricane stories. Those of you who've lived more than 60 years may have a few more stories. Agnes formed in the Yucatan Peninsula June 14, 1972. This monster storm reached over 2,000 miles wide from its center to hit the state of Florida as a Category 1 hurricane. The storm weakened but continued to surge up the coast, re-intensifying into a hurricane just over the state of North Carolina. Its winds reached hurricane force again off the coast of Virginia, but weakened as it moved forward. The rain continued and the storm strengthened again in North Carolina. Agnes brought with her rain that intensified as it moved over Virginia up to 14 inches. Because the storm was so wide as it surged, it caused a surge that did the most damage. Rain fell over a wide area, so the areas that were full from rain then hit the river. After the storm passed with the surge of water coming from upstream, the river inundated the city. Water levels in some places reached 17 feet above ground. Right where you're sitting, the water was 13 feet up in the air. It's hard to wrap your mind around that. So if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to look at the photos on display in the back of the event that took place. If you can see in one of the pictures that just has a large mass gray area, that's actually the 14th Street Bridge. The bridge would be completely covered if it weren't for the light posts sticking up out of the water. Agnes caused over $2 million in damage to businesses and homes. 8 lives were lost. Many people think because we are safe because of the beautiful accredited flood wall that we have. But I am quick to remind folks that there's a floodplain that sits behind the flood wall on both sides of the river. Hurricane Gaston reminded us that the flood wall only protects us from river flooding. Many areas are still at risk. The area where we sit right now is still at risk. We need to continue to make people aware that flooding can occur and that flooding will occur. So let me explain how we got here with the High Watermark program. About 2 years ago, David Bollinger from FEMA Region 3, Outreach Coordinator, first contacted me in late January of 2014 about a wonderful new high watermark campaign that Charlie Banks, our state NFIP coordinator, thought we might be interested in. Because of the recent flooding events and all the past flooding events, we would be a prime candidate for starting a flood awareness campaign in downtown Richmond. Little did Mr. Bollinger know that Richmond, more specifically I, was knee-deep in the throes of a stormwater program as mandated by the Department of Environmental Quality. Simultaneously, I was trying to comply with the gentle encouragement from the lovely Miss Mari Rofford from FEMA's Region 3 on updating our floodplain code so we could receive our letter of good standing to start our application for acceptance in the NFIP CRS community rating system. Now I can say that Mari's a really big fan of Richmond, but I have to mention that Region 3 is in Philly. And if you know Philly fans, you know what if you've ever watched the Eagles game or a Flyers game, you know what kind of fans Philly has. So, given that I was born in Philadelphia, her conversations were more like talking to family than the feds, sometimes. So we held off starting the program at that time, but John Hay, our then flood wall manager, picked up the ball again to start the process right before he left me to retire. Thanks, John. That was in November of 2014, and here we are 7 months later with our first round of signs. The high watermark team quickly came together to decide on the storm event, the locations, the sign design, and many other small details. We had very few face-to-face meetings, and in the end, did most of our communications via conference calls and emails. Before we go any further, I'd like to quickly thank the members of the team. Michelle Hamer from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Norfolk Division. Michelle was instrumental in helping coordinate all the meetings and historical facts about the storm and keeping the group on task. And Patrick Bloodgood as well from the U.S. Army Corps. Mari Rafford from FEMA Region 3 was also key to making sure we met all of FEMA's requirements, along with Vincent Brown. John Hay, our former flow wall manager for DPU, who gave us valuable historical facts. So if there's anything you want to know, the man in the tan baseball cap is the guy whose brain to pick. Matt Wall and Mark Slaughter from Virginia Department of Emergency Management also sat on the team, were great resources. Russ Lotspeech, hydrologist and surface water specialist with USGS, and Sean Wickling, I believe that's how you say his name. Eric Seymour from the National Weather Service with NOAA. Charlie Banks, our NFIP coordinator with DCR. Alex Dom with Venture Richmond. Angela Fountain, our public information manager for DPU. Taryn Dorsey, and Richard Lukestock, who created these beautiful signs from Ogilvy. I would like to also thank those cities' employees who work behind the scenes to bring this event together. Nathan Burrell with James River Park Association, Torrance Robertson with DPU, Edward Alford with DPU and his traffic engineering crew, Jackie Moon and Gay Stokes and Christine Brooks with DIT, who helped us print out those beautiful photos. Lastly, I would like to thank our consultant, Susan Mitchell and Laura Morrison with West Cary Group, for helping me put together these beautiful signs on such a short notice with very strict guidelines. If you could please all give a round of applause for these people. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. So Robert Stidell was appointed Director of Department of Public Utilities for the City of Richmond in March 2011 by Richmond's Chief Administrative Officer. Mr. Stidell oversees the operations of 5 major utilities: natural gas, water, wastewater, stormwater, and electric street lighting. DPU currently employs approximately 700,000 persons and provides natural gas, water, and wastewater services to more than 5,000 residents and commercial customers in the metropolitan region. In addition, DPU also operates an electric street lighting utility, which maintains more than 32,000 streetlights throughout the city. As a water professional, Mr. Steidel is passionate about issues surrounding water and wastewater treatment and delivery. He has served as president of the Virginia Association of Municipal Wastewater Agencies, Virginia Water Environment Association, is a board member of the James River Basin Association and the Wet Weather Partnership. In addition, Mr. Steidel is active in several state and national clean and safety water organizations, and in 2014-2015 participated in the working group of National Drinking Water Councils. I give you Mr. Bob Steidel.
Thank you, Janae. Before I begin, obviously this is driven by somebody's passion, and I want to thank Janae for her passion and her skill and her abilities to make sure that the floodplain program, the stormwater program, is the best it can be for the citizens of the city of Richmond. So please all join me in thanking her. I'm the guy that thinks of all these waterways as pipes and conduits. I'm sorry, Nathan, I don't see your beautiful park here. All I see is that river out there, and there's water in it, and I see the pipes. And our job, for those of us who work in the water business, is to understand how that water is going to flow, how it's going to impact the neighborhoods. Our first priority is to make sure that water goes where it's supposed to go, so nobody ever has to worry about it. Secondly, we want to make sure the transportation can occur. Third, we're looking at is trying to protect property. We're going to try to make sure the water goes where it can do to protect property. And finally, and we have had this happen, we want to make sure that we're trying to protect life. Very few people understand what you all understand when we talk about the power of water. The other day I was corresponding with a colleague about building in the floodplain. And I made a typo because you know how iPhones are. And when I typed, I said flood pain. And he wrote back immediately and said, yeah, that's what it is. It's flood pain. Well, it's not flood pain, because we all know that if it's not done right, the pain will be exponential when it's done wrong. And so it's critical that we have these kinds of programs. And when somebody looks at that sign, I really hope they understand how much water went through this area, could go through this area. It could exceed it again. And we all know what the power of water is. So we want to make sure we're very careful for that. We're lucky in Richmond. We have a stormwater utility where all of these programs are centralized, and we have funding and we have support from the mayor and from city council to be able to do this work. The stormwater utility alone has 35,000 catch basins in the city of Richmond, 600 miles of ditches, and 180 miles of storm sewer pipe. That's an awful lot for a very small, compact area. Plus, as Janae said earlier, we also operate the flood wall and levee systems, as well as the canal systems. So we've got a pretty big area where we're trying to control the water and trying to be able to make sure it goes into the right place. A couple things for our colleagues on flood wall. I think it's one of the greatest public works things we've got in the city of Richmond. It was completed in '95. It's 17,000 feet long, protects 750 acres on both sides of the river, both north side and south side of the river. And I didn't realize this till John came up with this about a year ago. 22,000 cubic yards of concrete went into that thing. 1,050 tons of reinforced steel and 55,000 linear feet of steel pipes, or pilings, I mean. So it's going in the right direction. It's well maintained, well operated, and we believe well constructed. So it's instrumental to keeping downtown safe, and we're so very glad while it's here. I do want to take another second and again thank Janae for all of her hard work and passion, as well as our FEMA colleagues on assisting us with the NFIP Community Rating System program that we have initiated, and we're going to continually to improve that program. I try to tell folks, again, they all talk about flood wall pain, or about flooding pain. By just starting this program, we're able to save the flood insurance to each person who has to currently maintain flood insurance in the city of Richmond. And it's only because we're doing the CRS program, we have a good, strong floodplain ordinance, we're enforcing it, we're making sure everybody does the right thing. And by being able to do that, we bring a service to everyone. Again, it's a service they're only going to see when it floods, and they're not even going to know about it, because even after it flooded, because we did the right things, the flood impacts are going to be much less. And I really, really thank her for doing that for us. It's a very top priority for us, and we're going to continue to improve on that. So with that, am I introducing John, or you're going to introduce John? Jay, you're going to introduce John. So I have exactly 13 more seconds. One thing that I do want you to know is in Richmond in the utilities department, because we are all water related issues, pollution issues, clean water issues in the city. We have a program called RVA H2O. And our RVA H2O is designed around using stakeholders to bring cleanest water faster that we possibly can in the city of Richmond on all different levels, whether it's wastewater treatment, stormwater treatment, or flood wall, anything. It's an open process. If anybody would like to join, rvah2o.org, it's on the website. And I would heartily encourage you to, if you don't want to get intimately involved, please read the information on there. It tells you what the city of Richmond is doing and its commitment and priority for clean and safe water in the city of Richmond. And with that, I will turn back over to Janelle. Jonae, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm not going to read all the way through each of the bios because you should have them in your packets, but I will skim through very quickly. Next up is Mr. John Buterla, who served the public for the past 37 years in law enforcement, homeland security, and city administration. He had a very successful career with the Connecticut State Police, where he attained the rank of major and served in many assignments, including commander of patrol and major crimes. He was the director of labor relations and served as chief of staff for the department. In October 2001, he was appointed as the first deputy director of Homeland Security for the state of Connecticut, and then went on to be director. He left the state and became chief administrative officer for the city of New Haven, Connecticut. He left New Haven and making a decision of the heart to serve his hometown of Stafford, Connecticut as police chief until he came to Richmond as the deputy police chief for support services 5 years ago. In March of 2015, Mayor Jones appointed him as the lead and project director for the UCI Road World Championship, which was fabulous if you didn't happen to attend. It was in September of 2015. He was appointed as the interim deputy chief administrative officer for operations for the city of Richmond in October, where he currently serves. I give you Mr. John Buterla.
Good morning, everyone. I do want to say how impressed I was how quickly the DPU crew got these tents up. When I pulled up and I saw them assembling them, I figured we're going to be here for a minute, but it literally was minutes. So I have to say thank you to them and their continued efforts. I am here on behalf of Mayor Dwight Jones and our CAO, Selena Cuffey-Glenn. And on behalf of Mayor Jones, to our residents and our guests, welcome. Welcome to the city of Richmond. And we certainly appreciate the fact that you are here and taking advantage of our beautiful city that's had some little bit of weather-related issues lately, but we are working to clean those up as we speak. So, as one of the first cities to be established in the United States, Richmond has a rich and vibrant history. We can look at the history and see many things that our city has done extremely well, that in addition to many lessons that we have learned and lessons that we were able to translate to improvements to continue to see our city grow and thrive. One of the main priorities of Mayor Jones' administration is to make Richmond a destination to live, to build, start a business, work, play, and have fun. And this James River Park system is one place where you can definitely have fun. Nathan, great job here. Long-standing businesses and increased home ownership are vital to a strong and vibrant economy. Ensuring that our city is safe is critical to that end. That is what today is really all about. Over the past few years, our city has had its share of weather-related issues. I could say over the past few days, but we've seen firsthand how growth and development, rebuilding, and the rebuilding is costly and time-consuming. Certainly, that lesson can be seen with our friends in Louisiana. In the fall will be the 11th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and parts of New Orleans are still being rebuilt. Risk awareness opens the door to conversations that look for opportunities to fill holes where we can make improvements and mitigate problems. Signage is simple and easy. If one sign can save a life, it's worth the effort. So I want to thank you for your presence here today, and a special thanks to all the partners. And certainly the city has a long history of reaching out and partnering with federal, state, local agencies, our regional cooperation. But particularly I want to thank Virginia Department of Emergency Management, who worked with us essentially nonstop over the last weekend and continue to. Virginia Public Safety, the Virginia Silver Jackets, FEMA, always a partner and always willing to help. The United States Geological Society, Department of Conservation and Recreation, Army Corps of Engineers, National Weather Service, Venture Richmond, and as I said, VDEM, Department of Emergency Management. We are truly appreciative of the partnerships, and we look forward to continue our partnerships. And it is impressive when you look behind me and you see that sign and you realize that how high the water can come. And what I will share on a personal note is I live in Shockoe Bottom. Some people think I'm crazy, but I live in Shockoe Bottom and walk by the flood wall and walk by the businesses that have marks on there from various hurricanes and floodings. And it is pretty impressive when you see what water can do and where it can go and how it can impact our lives every day. And so this high watermark initiative and our continued efforts in DPU and the city are certainly a testament to our commitment to make sure that our city remains safe, secure, and that people can truly enjoy it. So that I say thank you to you all for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Butola. Just to piggyback on that, there is a high watermark sign at Great Shiplock Park, which happens to have a 17-foot high marker. And Susan Mitchell, who works with the West Cary Group, when we were designing the sign, came back to me and said, "I don't think that's right." And I said, "Yes, Russ told me it was 17 feet. He was like, "Are you sure?" I was like, I'm staying in my lane. That's what he told me. And we're going to go with that because it has a flood gauge at it. And that flood gauge was, he took the markings off the flood gauge. So Angela Fountain came to me and she said, "Let's put up photos." And I said, "Okay." So I went to Library of Virginia and I found all these great photos. And I happened to find a photograph of Great Shiplock Park. It is one of those bottom photographs. I believe it's it's the one with the train trestle that's split into two. If you look, that's actually CSX. If you look back, there's a grove of trees. That is Great Shiplock Park, and that is how high the water got. So it makes me feel good that Russ was right, and it seems unfathomable, but it actually did happen. So if you ever have an opportunity to walk the beautiful Capitol Trail, which actually has been landscaped, and it's a really wonderful area to go see, the high watermark sign sits right at the convergence of CSX, the Capitol Trail, and the parking lot at Great Shiplock Park and Dock Street. It sits right as the trail crosses, and so it's a great big beautiful sign like this. But that sign is way at the top of that pole, so just get a sense. And that slope behind it goes up to Church Hill, so that is very elevated area. That area in there is steep. And then if you actually go down to Chapel Island on the other side, the distance between where you are at the water to where you are, I believe, is about 40 feet. So you figure that river had to fill in 40 feet plus an extra 17 feet above the ground right where it's standing, all the way across the river. So it's really hard to wrap your mind around, and I really think these signs, serve that purpose. So with that, let me introduce Ms. April Cummings, is the Mitigation Division's Deputy Director at FEMA Region 3 in Philadelphia. The Mitigation Division strives to create safer communities by reducing risk of loss of life and property. Before starting at Region 3, April was the Deputy Director, Environmental Chief Officer at FEMA Region 4 in Atlanta, Georgia. During her time at Region 4, April completed a detail at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's Office of Public Health and Preparedness and Response. In her free time, April is currently learning to navigate her new hometown, Philadelphia. Give me a call. Just remember, everything's a one-way street. In her free time, when she's not lost, she enjoys learning how to garden, jogging in her new neighborhood, reading history books, and finding more things she needs to fix in her old house. I give you April Cummings.
I feel so short. Hi everyone, I'm April Cummings, and just a few things before I start with my remarks. It's nice to actually be a FEMA person out and about for a good reason and not responding to a disaster. Very rarely does that happen. And I just started in Region 3 in November, so this is one of my first trips to a community for a good reason. I mean, double bonus right there. And then, as you were just remarking, if one sign can save a life, that's a great thing. I was a little kid, grew up in New England, and in the mountains, so not a lot of flooding in the tops of mountains. But as a kid, we would always go vacation in Boston or in the seashore in Portland, and we'd always see signs from whatever storms they had, and the high water marks on the buildings, even if it was just a white mark. And then I was down at Hurricane Katrina for 2 years in Gulfport, and I noticed in the packet that everyone got, there was just a high water mark campaign down there. And I remember seeing the Hurricane Camille signs there because they had those existing in 2005, 2006. And it's just crazy to see Katrina even higher than that. But I remember thinking, wow, I can't imagine how high water can get. And just 13 feet, I'm like, that's over 2 times as tall as I am, which is phenomenal. Anyways, I'm going to take it out a little more broadly than Richmond specific. I want to talk about flooding, Hurricane Agnes briefly, and then just awareness and preparedness. So flooding, most common type of natural disaster that we have in the United States. It's also the most common type of presidential declaration that is declared. There can be many causes for flooding. It can be part of a hurricane system. It can be part of ice jams, failure of water control structures. It's when rain accumulates faster than the ground can absorb. So people may not be thinking about this out of mind, out of sight, out of memory. Don't think about it. They may think that if a property is not located near a floodplain or water, that they have no risk or their risk is minimal. They don't think about the fact that critical infrastructure can be located in low-lying areas, either near or in a floodplain, and that could affect the systems that they have at their house, such as water, even electric in some places. And then they also think that once the rain has stopped, the risk is gone. Water can stay for quite a while if it's flooding, so you got to get that message out too. FEMA did a survey a few years ago, and only 30% of people responding to the flood risk awareness study actually even thought flooding was a risk for their community. And of that, only 10% of the people thought that their house was at risk for flooding. So very little awareness on the magnitude that flooding, the magnitude of damage a flooding event can have. So again, if it's not in sight, it's not in your memory, it's completely out of mind. Which brings me to Hurricane Agnes, which was 44 years ago. Not really going to deep dive because a few of you have already talked about it, but if you notice, Hurricane Agnes starts with the letter A. That means it was the first declared storm of the hurricane season in 1972. It formed 14 days after the actual traditional hurricane season started, and its initial landfall was in Florida as a Category 1 hurricane, which is not even a major hurricane at that level. Category 3 is typical for a major storm. And then by the time it got to Virginia, from my understanding, it had increased and then decreased to a tropical storm status. So there were about 16 deaths is what I read, 13 locally here. Most of those deaths were caused by actually trying to drive through the flooding, the flooded streets. Along with those deaths, Amtrak trains were stranded in between here and Richmond because of flooding, and the wastewater treatment plant was inundated, and tens of thousands of propane tanks were also floating. We had that same issue in the Nashville floods. So because of the extensive damage that Agnes caused and the severe death toll, the name Agnes was actually retired from the naming convention that they have for tropical cyclones. So a few takeaways from Agnes is that hurricanes can cause severe amount of damage regardless of when they happen in the season. They can form and be significant very early in the season. A storm does not need to actually remain in hurricane status to cause a significant amount of damage. Some people don't really think about that. If it's no longer a hurricane, we don't have to worry about it. It's just a tropical storm or depression. And then flooding can also cause additional risk, like floating propane tanks or a fire risk. So there's other things on top of flooding that, or in addition to flooding, that can happen during those types of events. So much like it takes a village to recover from a disaster like Agnes, it takes a village to increase awareness of the risk that a town has. This effort, which is great, Dave B. works for me, so I can imagine what the conversation was like with him a few years ago. This effort was also a partnership between the city of Richmond and all the Virginia Silver Jackets people or teams that have been mentioned previously. The new signage hopefully will start the conversation with people about knowing your risk, mitigating your risk, and if you can't mitigate the risk, insuring the risk, which the first speaker had mentioned. And then it will provide visual reminders and context to community members and tourists that are in town that didn't experience Agnes that, disasters inevitably happen, and this is what can happen if you're not prepared, or even if you are prepared. It may make people more interested in finding out what their risk to their own house is, not to mention just their community, but what their actual risk is. It may actually encourage people to create go bags or emergency plans in case something happens to their community. So it makes a conversation with the family. Most importantly, it will provide a stepping stone to start or increase these conversations, engage people in mitigation planning, and have that flood risk conversation at all levels and within all areas of the community. And as you know, you never know, a little kid could come by reading these signs and be really interested in it, go home, Google something that wasn't available when I was a child, and start looking up flooding and what to do, how to make it better, what they can do to plan with the family, and maybe even become an emergency planner in the future. With that, I just really want to thank everybody for inviting us here, all the team members that made this happen, and I want to congratulate Richmond, Virginia, for becoming the first community in Virginia to unveil this campaign. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cummings. I just want to mention that if you're not out here in the park system, today is probably the quietest day since we've started that I've seen at this park area. Normally there are boaters and fishers and groups of kids and paddle boarders because there's a boat put in. There's a little space right there where you can see the geese on the rocks out there. That's actually steps that you can go down and get right into the water right here. So this area is very busy. So this is a spot for education here. We constantly see kids and people walking by. So we hope there will be people inspired by the sign and take heed of the sign and understand what it means. Next up is, and now this is a typo, so if anyone should have to retype this, it's actually Lieutenant Colonel John Drew. So I just want to clarify that. I don't want to give a demotion to anybody because I know how hard he worked to get that. Lieutenant Colonel John Drew graduated from Missouri Western State University with a Bachelor of Science in Construction Engineering Technology and was commissioned in the Corps of Engineers in December of 1993. He also holds a master's degree in management from Webster's University. He's a lead accredited professional since 2009. Lieutenant Colonel Drew entered active duty and attended the U.S. Army Engineer Officer Basic Courses at Fort Lee Wood, Missouri, and his first unit assignment was as a paratrooper with the 362nd Engineer Company at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Lieutenant Colonel Drew attended Engineer Officer Advanced Course at Fort Leonard Wood and the Combined Army Services Staff School at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He went on to serve as company commander for C Company, 35th Engineering Battalion at Fort Leonard Wood, and C Company, 169th Engineer Battalion with duty at Gulfport, Mississippi. He attended the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Following that, he deployed to Iraq for a year as a military transition team chief at Camp Echo. Lieutenant Colonel Drew is married to Kimberly, and they have 6 children. I give you Lieutenant Colonel John Drew.
Thank you. And so I was down in Gulfport, Mississippi, a place that is very close to New Orleans. I lived in Biloxi at the time, and that was the year before Katrina came through. So the guy who followed me was fortunate enough to deal with that one. He had an interesting time there. But I looked back, and I remember in the pictures looking at where my house was, and all you could see was the rooftop. And it was very impressive to me. And so since that day, I've always, really been humbled by the power of water and what it can do. And so we wanted to start out by just saying thank you to everyone for coming out today. The Norfolk District of the Army Corps of Engineers is very proud to partner with other agencies, the City of Richmond, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and be able to post this marker showing how rising waters have affected this area in the past. And it's really humbling to sit here and think that, when you look at the level indicated by the marker, not only was where we're standing and sitting underwater, I would have been underwater. This tent that we're sitting under would have been underwater at that time. And it's really impressive to think about that. And this visible reminder marks the water level at that moment in time. And we hope that it reminds us constantly that we need to plan for the future. We need to keep resilience in mind, because the water will come again, and we must work to ensure that we reduce the risk and impacts of flooding in the days ahead. And the Corps is very proud to sponsor the Silver Jackets program. And this is an innovative program that brings together various agencies and organizations in a holistic approach to the flood fight. Many agencies, many organizations have a part in reducing the impacts of flooding. But no one group has all the answers or all the resources to go at it alone. So working collaboratively with federal, with Commonwealth, and with local partners, the Silver Jackets program seeks to identify flood risk and to reduce those risks through a variety of efforts, leveraging the expertise and resources of the entire group for the benefit of all. The Silver Jackets recognizes, and recent history confirms, that water recognizes no boundaries. At any time, and even in unexpected areas and from unexpected directions, flooding can occur. We encourage everyone, from agencies and individual citizens, to know their flood risk, to prepare for an event. The studies and the construction of long-term flood control measures can reduce risk, but it can never prevent flooding in all areas or at all times. So it's still very important for everyone to know and understand what they should do if flooding occurs in their areas. And on behalf of the Silver Jackets and the Norfolk District Army Corps of Engineers, I want to again thank everyone that's involved in erecting this marker. It is an important reminder of the flooding of the past and the work that needs to be done today and in the future to reduce the risk and impacts of flooding. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Drew. Now, lastly, we have our last speaker, Mr. Curtis Brown. Governor Terry McAuliffe appointed Curtis Brown to serve as Deputy Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security in May of 2016. Immediately prior to his appointment, Brown was the Virginia Department of Emergency Management's Chief Deputy State Coordinator, where he had served since June of 2014. Prior to joining VDEM, Brown was the Regional Emergency Management Administrator for Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. Before his tenure with the HRPDC, Brown served as professional staff for the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security, where he was responsible for oversight of several Department Homeland Security and Federal Emergency Management initiatives, including emergency communication preparedness grants and Homeland Defense. Brown received his Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science from Radford University and holds a Master's of Public Administration degree from Virginia Tech and a Master of Arts degree in Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness from Virginia Commonwealth VCU. He is also a graduate of the Virginia Executive and Commonwealth Management Institutes. I give you Mr. Curtis Brown.
Thank you, Jonay, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for that kind introduction, and so happy to be here today. I bring you greetings on behalf of Governor Terry McAuliffe, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security Brian Moran, who was designated by Governor McAuliffe as Virginia's first Chief Resilience Officer. My office works together with partners on the local, state, and federal level to build resilience and prepare for all hazards. And I think today's unveiling of the high water sign and celebrating with Richmond demonstrates the partnership that we need to prepare for all hazards. Despite the powerful storm in 1972, Richmond is still here, and our communities are thriving. So it's a good example of resilience, as well as the destructive power of nature. I would like to recognize all our partners here today. We work very closely with all of them on a daily basis to plan and prepare. Work with FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, the Silver Jackets, NOAA, USGS, DCR, Venture Virginia, and the National Weather Service on a constant basis to build resilience. The ability to initiate this effort today shows that we need the whole of community, both local government and citizens, to take action now to build resilience. No one can do it on their own. This year alone here in Virginia, we've seen the powerful force of nature already. In January, we had record snowfall, over 3 feet in some places. That was so powerful, we were able to, it resulted in a federal disaster declaration, over $70 million and counting of damage across the Commonwealth, and that recovery effort continues. In February, of course, we dealt with unprecedented outbreak of 8 tornadoes that resulted in 5 fatalities and damage in multiple communities. We're seeing more powerful weather, severe weather and storms, and of course we always deal with flooding across the Commonwealth. Of course, last week's event knocked out power, as was mentioned, to over 200,000 Virginians, and that was just a normal summer thunderstorm. So within our built environment, we need to build resilience and be able to bounce back, and everyone has to play their part. As it relates to resilience, we're always constantly reaching out to citizens to let them know what they can do to build resilience on the local level. Purchasing emergency supplies, building a kit and a plan for your family, and staying in tune with emergency information are some of the small steps they can take to build resilience. Many of the local communities have text and alert programs that they can sign up for. They also need to talk to insurance providers about flood insurance, understanding their risks of where they live, assembling a kit for your home office and car. One of the tools available by the Virginia Department of Emergency Management is the Ready Virginia app, which can be downloaded via your iPhone or Android at readyvirginia.gov. A recent addition to that app is an I Am Safe app, which automatically loads in contacts for your friends and family to automatically let them know that you're safe in case of any number of disasters, including active shooter, etc. So these are all simple steps for you to build your resilience, to use technology to ensure that you and your family are safe. And we hope that this sign, this unveiling, which demonstrates the power of nature and the incredible height of the water, will push folks to make the decisions to build resilience and to prepare. So as we move forward in this hurricane season, we've already seen some powerful weather. The most intense part of hurricane season here in Virginia is actually the second half, but that does not give us any pause. We need to prepare and stay prepared year round. And so again, I thank City of Richmond for this invitation and the partnership from everyone here to build resilience, and hopefully we can all do our part to promote resilience for citizens as well as in government to prepare for our next storm. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have a list of hurricanes, and I was quickly trying to run through how many hurricanes we have. And actually, since 1952, we've had about 21 hurricanes from 1952 to 2006 hit the state of Virginia. And to Mr. Brown's point, more than 16 of those actually hit between August and September. So he's correct that the worst part of the storm year for us is actually in the later part of the year. And Angela Fountain, the communications officer, was fussing at me because I was running around in the background trying to get things together. And actually, the day I got married was Hurricane Dennis. And not but a week later, we got hit by Hurricane Floyd. So this weather brought back really kind of fun, but not so fun flashbacks. So I thank you, Mr. Brown, and I thank all the speakers for coming out today and braving the weather and being patient with us setting up. So now, Mr. Butterla, if you will come up with me, I have a pair of scissors, and we're going to get on with the unveiling of the sign. So it's not raining, so I would invite everyone to come up if you like.
And